Right now, you can buy a game on Steam in about 4 clicks. 84% positive reviews. The people who play it like it very much. And as I'm recording this, there is one person playing right now with a 24-hour peak of 4 concurrent players. 4 total. It's called Moonbreaker, and the weird part is it's not shut down. No servers going dark, no goodbye posts, nothing. The final update landed in February of 2024 and the studio just stopped. It's still for sale, it still runs fine, there's just nobody in it. So I keep coming back to the adage of the canary in the coal mine. The story behind it is that miners would bring a canary down with them because the bird is able to tell if the air is bad first. It goes quiet in its cage before anyone up top notices anything is wrong, but if you're paying attention, that is a warning. Moonbreaker went quiet about a year before the same thing hit a much bigger game at the same studio, and the one that you might have heard about because it came with a $250 million lawsuit and a CEO asking ChatGPT for help. Everyone covered that one. Almost nobody went back to look at the small game that went first. So I want to. And the reason I'm doing this is because the game is, even now, in its barely live state, it is still damn good. Moonbreaker is a digital miniatures tabletop skirmish type of game. Little squads on the battlefield but on a screen, and the ambition on it was way out of scale with the budget. Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy author, the guy who finished The Wheel of Time, the guy who started the Cosmere, Breaker of Chains, the one with the rabid reader base, he built the entire universe himself. Not a producer credit. We're talking weekly world-building calls, a setting laid out like the Canterbury Tales, 30 characters worth of perspectives meant to roll out over 10 years or more. There were audio dramas that were released. There was a painting suite deep enough that you could sit and dry brush a single figure for an hour and feel like you actually made something. And the care shows up everywhere. There's an old design rule that you should be able to recognize a character from their silhouette alone. Just the outline, nothing else. Moonbreaker pulls that off twice over. You can read who a character is from their shape, and you can read which crew that they run with, which means that you could build a team that actually looked like it belonged together, colors and whole vibe lining up. And for the most part, it would actually play well together too. And Charlie Cleveland, who directed it, same guy who helped make Subnautica, said my favorite thing in this whole story: I actually loathe digital board games. Can't stand them. He made one anyway for the love of the game. The painting, the list building, the lore that you disappear into for years. And to hand that all to people who had never set up a real table before, like handing down elite ball knowledge to somebody who's barely able to walk. That is somebody who is trying to hand you a hobby. Like, the moment that I knew that people making this actually knew how a tabletop game worked, honestly, the terrain. Every little piece of cover has its own base, like real scenery in a miniature wargame. And that's a detail that you only think to add if you've actually played it, if you're really about that life. It makes a battlefield easy to set up and move around, and it fits the aesthetic. And there's a way that the units move. They're standing still. They're still miniatures, they're still static and posed, but the way that they slide across the board and fight, they do things like they hover and wobble and they clack into each other. It's like a pair of invisible hands just shoving them around a table. Those were the details that sold me on this game. It plays like a real tabletop war game, just rendered on screen. Something that probably sounds so whatever, but for anyone who has engaged in the hobby in its entirety, I can't emphasize enough. This felt like a real digital war game. The silhouettes, the terrain on the little bases, the painting tool that nobody asked for, at least not this depth, and a story that was built to run for 10 years. And in 2021, the studio that made it gets bought, woohoo, by a company named Krafton. Yeah, the PUBG company, the very, very rich company from Korea, the one that paid $500 million up front for Unknown Worlds, the studio behind the hit game Subnautica. And there's a second number that matters more than it looks. It's an earnout bonus, up to $250 million more if the studio's revenue cleared certain marks over the next few years. And it's how that bonus is built that sets the rest of this story in motion. It's leveraged. It's a hard goal, technically reachable. For every dollar of company revenue that is earned over $70 million a month, Krafton owed $3.12, up to a cap of $250 million. So I would almost equate this incentive as saying, hey, if you beat me in a race, I will punch myself in the face. You know, the better that the studio does, the more that the people who bought it will owe those founders, those heads of the studio. So if that's a little bit confusing, I'm sorry. Just kind of let it marinate in the back of your head a little bit, because that is kind of the engine that sets off everything to follow. The moment that the work starts to pay off, the company that owns it realizes that they are on the hook for a fortune. This is going to be our B plot, by the way. So Moonbreaker hits early access in September of 2022, and it's right out of the gate. It's carrying the exact thing that this whole video is about: a hard currency, loot boxes, units that you unlock by paying real money for a roll of the dice. People really like the game underneath. They love the painting, the fights on the board, but they hate that part, and loudly. The studio listens, and inside a month, they decide to pull it all out. The store goes dark, the loot boxes are gone, everyone actually gets refunded through Steam, and every unit is now unlocked for free. They looked at the paywall on their own game and decided that it was better gone. As someone that comes from a corporate background, let's really just applaud this leadership here. These people handed money back to players that they didn't have to refund. About a year later, the people that bought them, the people upstairs, would fight tooth and nail to not pay them money that they were owed. But back to Moonbreaker. After that, updates land every couple of months. The studio was clearly trying, clearly listening to the fans. The painting system starts developing a bit of a cult following. It ships 1.0 in February of 2024. In that same week, the updates just stop. For good. Internal documents that come out later call it flatly a commercial failure. It never even pulled enough critic reviews for a Metacritic score. It didn't even get a chance to breathe before being labeled and written off as a failure. And like, the cosmic irony to me out of all of this is someone who loves Brandon Sanderson as a storyteller, you know, the most prolific working author alive right now. The man does publish faster than most people can read. But anyways, he builds a universe, a 10-year story engine, and all that ever came out of the game that he built this world for was a roguelike boss rush mode, 4 audio dramas, and a text-only lore codex like in Destiny. It never lasted long enough to even grow the bones of a real story mode, and you know that there would have been some insane twists going on in there too. To this day, even now, people are still wandering in. Reviews have slowed to a trickle, but they are still trickling in 2026, long after the studio has walked off and luckily revived itself on a new project. Most of them talk about it like it's just a good little game that quietly got dropped. Hardly anybody mentions Unknown Worlds and all the controversy that it's been up to. Hardly anyone connects it to everything that came after, and people that are still showing up now mostly have no idea what they're standing in. Some people are getting upset that there's no updates. Fair enough. And here's why this one kind of sticks with me in the back of my mind, instead of just filling it as a sad little footnote and a potential like tax write-off or something. The same Standoff that later blew up in the public, the version that made the headlines, that was already kind of running in the background here quietly years before anyone even started looking. The founders didn't want to let Moonbreaker go. The court records say it straight. Max McGuire, one of the co-founders, kept working on Moonbreaker instead of moving on to the Subnautica sequel that management wanted. And yes, you could see management's side on the matter. The sequel was the only thing that was big enough to even have the bonus be in negotiation. So you've got the creators that at least wanted to keep working on this small, weird little passion project that they loved, and then you had the corporate people upstairs that needed them for the one big thing that was the whole reason that they bought the company. This disagreement in project management was one of the small levers that Krafton would use use in their lawsuit against the creators of Subnautica 2. It's just at this moment there wasn't enough money on the table for it to get to that point. When Moonbreaker didn't land, the founders, they did well, I would say the normal thing, but I mean, this is America. Cleveland, who was now burned out, stepped back, and him and others moved into smaller roles, and they ended up taking pay cuts as well. And as I stated, those were the types of things that Krafton would later use against him in the court of law. When the company wanted the founders gone before the payout came due, its whole case boiled down to this. Look, they already stepped back. They weren't really running the place anymore. The quiet wreckage of Moonbreaker became the weapon that Krafton swung at them on the next game. The only reason that it fell apart in court was that all of it sat logged in Krafton's own internal systems. Okay, so little known fact about me, I used to paint miniature figurines. I still do, but I used to. I just don't have the time anymore. And honestly, that is an itch that Moonbreaker has actually been able to scratch on and off throughout the years. In real life, painting miniatures is like a whole production. 10 minutes getting out the paints and the brushes, the water, the light, all that other stuff, the grandpa glasses. You do whatever you need to do. You take the time that you need to get into the zone. And then when you're all done, you spend like another 10 minutes breaking it all down and cleaning up. It's uphill in the snow both ways. With Moonbreaker, I can open it up, get a quiet 20 minutes before bed, shut down my computer, nothing to clean. And like I said, it respects the actual craft. You have a wash to sink shadows into the folds. You can dry brush to catch the highlights. You can actually do edge highlighting. You can mimic an airbrush. You have a palette to blend colors in. And like the catch with real mini painting is the hands, obviously. Keeping the paint exactly where you mean it, coat after coat, never bleeding past an edge. That is a skill that people spend years defining. And it's the one thing that's probably standing between a beginner and a model that doesn't look like a beginner made it. What I love about Moonbreaker is that it just does that part for you. It has a feature that is called auto mask, and it pins your brush to whatever piece that you're currently on. So whether it be the cloak, the blade, the skin, so you couldn't just slop over the line even if you tried. With that gone, a complete first-timer is painting at a level where the only thing left to figure out is which technique to reach for. That's the intermediate experience, the one where your hands already know the job, and you get it on your very first model, which is just amazing. It skips the year of frustration that makes most people set the brush down for good, and it leaves you with the part that actually carries over to a real table. So the Subnautica 2 version of this story is the one that made the news. The same song as Moonbreaker, just turned all the way up to 11. Same studio, just 1 year later. By spring of 2025, Moonbreaker was done and Subnautica 2 was the only thing left big enough to trip that payout. And Krafton's own projections say that it's going to. So the CEO, Chang-Hyun Kim, decides that he signed a bad deal, and instead of calling his lawyers, he opens up ChatGPT to ask them how to get out of paying. But I'm pretty sure like his lawyers were like, no, you have to follow through on this. But he pretty much was like, no, man, Sam Altman's got my back on this, dog. And I think that part is genuinely funny in a dystopian, bleak sort of way. The chatbot's first answer was the same as his lawyers, was basically, you can't, dude, it's a contract. But he keeps pushing it, he keeps finagling, he keeps prompt engineering it, and eventually it hands him a plan in the filings, literally called Project X. Not the movie, the corporate strategy. Take over the studio, lock down the Steam rights and the code, sell the public on fan trust and quality, never money, and document everything. Document everything. Probably the best, worst advice you can ever have in corporate life, because in corporate life, you want to document everything. In a moment like this is how it built the paper trail that sank him. So Project X is now in effect, a public post inviting the two founders to lead Subnautica 2 while they're being shoved out the door at the same time. The studio is locked out of its own launch. By July 1st of 2025, all three of them, the two founders and their CEO, Ted Gill, were fired for cause, on the same excuses that, like I said, trace back to the development and continued development of Moonbreaker. And here's where everything starts to fall apart. Delaware of March of 2026, Vice Chancellor Lori Will rules that Krafton has breached their contract. No real cause, none of it holds. and now Gil is back in the CEO chair that he was shoved out of. So Subnautica 2 launches May 2026, and it does 1 million copies in the first hour, around 4 million inside a week. The payout that Changhyun Kim spent a year trying to dodge is triggered in full. The whole quarter billy. All of that effort, all of that goodwill, and all he did was make it bigger. And like I said towards the beginning of this video, the chatbot, the courtroom aspects of it are all new, but the song underneath them isn't. But also, you know, Brandon Sanderson, like how do you drop the ball on Brandon Sanderson? I guess we'll find out, Apple TV. So here's the part where I'm going to make a sacrifice to the gods of speculation. And obviously, fair warning, none of this has happened, but it could happen, because look at where all of this has landed. The two guys who didn't want to let Moonbreaker go, who kept tending to it when management wanted them on the big game, the court handed them back their studio. And Subnautica 2 turned into exactly the hit that Krafton was so scared of paying for. So the people who made this little game won control back of the place that makes it, with the leverage and the money that they didn't have a year ago. Now, nobody said a word about bringing Moonbreaker back, but for the first time since February of 2024, the timeline where somebody picks it back up isn't crazy. It's not speculation anymore. The people who would want to are now in the room. They have the money, they have the resources. I'm just saying it could be back on the table. It's possible now. More Moonbreaker, please. And I mean, for better or for worse, there's so little to actually come back to. We have the starting characters, we have the one mode, we have the painting mode, and I mean, that's pretty much it. We have the 4 audiobooks. And that's why I can't stop imagining it. Like, do they still have the rights to all of the world building stuff? Can they still continue on with the game plan? From a Wargamer seat, the rules were already clean enough that you could lift the whole thing into a real table without much trouble. The only missing piece was the minis themselves. And this is something that they even talked about in early development, but there is an alternate timeline where you could paint a miniature in the game, your colors, your hours on it, and then a few weeks later, a 3D printed copy turns up in a door painted to your match. Like I said, I'm not reaching here. Somebody asked for exactly that on the launch stream. Can you 3D print your own minis from the game? And the only hang-up Cleveland gave was not wanting to pump more plastic into the oceans. So obviously I don't know how they would get the production to work with all that. That's the alternate timeline's problem to solve, not mine. But you can feel how close this was. They were openly kicking it around on that very stream right up until the lights went out. Somebody nearly built this, and it would have been so cool. So I don't want to call this like a eulogy, but this is pretty much just me waxing nostalgic about a game that couldn't survive a spreadsheet, really. We touched on how there was a 10-year story planned. There was a painting tool with no business being as good as it was. We had a director that was chasing the craft instead of chasing the quarter. Those are always the first things to get cut because they are the hardest things to put a number on. And it'd be easy to pin that all on one dumb CEO, but that's the part that I'd push back on. Because this is still the same Krafton, the people who helped bring PUBG to the masses, the same people that bought Tango Gameworks out of the rubble after Microsoft decided to shut it down. And yes, I will touch on Microsoft here in a minute. Same people. A year later, buying a beloved studio and gutting one turned out to be the same reflex that was just pointed in opposite directions. Whatever the quarterly reports wanted. The Embracer Group borrowed billions. The numbers turned, and then studios that were 30 years old were gone in a week. Sony set aside $1 billion to keep Bungie's people and laid off hundreds of them anyways, as of a week. The incentive does not do this on its own. There is no villain required. And I mean, like I said, it isn't even 3 companies or 4. A third of the people who make up the games industry lost their jobs at least once in the last 2 years. A third, including me. And as of this week of June 2026, Microsoft reportedly closing down studios that just announced their next set of games. Ninja Theory, the studio behind the Hellblade Senua series. And all of this is why I can't really hand you the happy ending that I wish I could for this video, or even like a wistful ending. Even now, with the founders back where they belong, the thing that emptied this game out hasn't really gone anywhere. So yeah, Everyone told the loud story. Everyone already talked about the lawsuit, ChatGPT, the $250 million involved. But by the time something is a $250 million court case, the warning's already come and gone. It came a year earlier in a small game that went quiet while the stakes were still too low for anybody to look. And that's the thing about a Canary. One day you just look at it and it's still. No alarm or no headline. You can only catch it if you were paying attention earlier. Moonbreaker showed you what was coming a year before the lawsuit put Krafton's name on it. And well before Microsoft decided to put their name on this week as well. The only difference is that the loud versions came with receipts. This one just came with a couple patch notes that ended in February of 2024. By the end, it was down to about 2 players. The game is still up, by the way. It's on sale right now for some reason. Krafton is having a publisher sale on Steam, and a whole bunch of games that don't have studios are on sale. It is weird. I don't like it. But the game is still up, and if you have $15 to burn in this economy, well, you know what? You can maybe make it 3. And yeah, I know, I might be the last guy who should probably still be daydreaming about painting a mini at my desk and having a real one show up at my door, but knowing exactly how this business grinds people up and still wanting some idealized version of it, I don't think those have ever been mutually exclusive, at least not for me. So, happy gaming summer, everyone. Yeah, I think about Moonbreaker a lot, and doing some research and realizing that it was the same Krafton, the same Unknown Worlds, the same team behind Subnautica, I had to do a video. I at least had to put these couple of missing links out there for anyone who cares enough to know about all this. And I can't in good conscience tell you to buy Moonbreaker, but if you are able to play the game somehow, it is so much fun. I adore it so much, and I'm at least glad that I was able to partake in this little tiny part of gaming history. And if you were still watching, we have more gaming videos coming up. And also, don't forget to get a deck box at aftermidnighttavern.com. Maybe join my Patreon, and that way you can get a discount on my online store for anything in the store. That includes Lorcana decks, deck boxes, you know, gift mugs, anything like that. So, if you are still listening, here's a spoiler on what my kids are playing so far. Right now, I have my 8-year-old going through Little Nightmares. I'm gonna have my 10-year-old, my son, start Outer Wilds, like I said. And talking to my 12-year-old, she actually wanted to try out What Remains of Edith Finch, which I was on my list, but I didn't think that she would like that game at all. So I am very surprised, very intrigued. It's like a 2-hour game, so we can knock it out in an afternoon. So once I can get those games bought for my kids, I'm going to do so. And yeah, the gaming videos for this summer will continue until morale improves. So hopefully for you guys, morale never improves. And I need to start getting this edited. So yeah, check out me on socials. Check out me on aftermidnighttavern.com. Help keep me as sponsor free as possible by supporting small artists and independent whatevers. Okay, I really want to get started on this now, so I will talk to you guys all later. See you in the next video. Okay, bye, peace, love you all. Patreon, like, share, subscribe, bye.